V's. Crime was so audacious it defied belief. A gang of thieves infiltrated one of the most secure buildings in London and made off with at least $40 million worth of loot. It's known as the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit burglary and is considered the biggest cash heist in British history. But how did these criminals pull off such an elaborate scheme, and what happened to their ill-gotten gains? This is the true story of the Hatton Garden Raiders. It all began with the infamous Baker's Man. His name was Brian Reader, and he was a professional criminal. He'd been involved in armed robberies and other daring heists since he was just 14 years old. Now in his late 70s, he wanted one last big score. So he set his sights on the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit building in central London. Located in the heart of London's Diamond District, it was a 19th-century structure that housed hundreds of safe deposit boxes. Wealthy individuals and businesses alike stored their valuables in its reinforced concrete chambers, which were accessed via a labyrinth of tunnels. Forget Fort Knox, Hatton Garden was supposedly the most secure building in Britain. That is, until Brian Reader and his gang showed up. In the early hours of April 2015, surveillance footage captured 3 men entering the premises. They were joined by 2 accomplices who entered separately. The team's inside man was a former employee named Hugh Error, who'd been fired for stealing jewelry from customers. He let the group in using a fire exit after disabling the alarm system. Once inside, they barricaded the doors and got to work today, but their entry point was soon compromised when a delivery driver arrived early for drop-off. Luckily, Brian Reader was thinking ahead. He'd stashed a length of wood behind a nearby cabinet, which he used to jam the door open and keep the driver out. While his accomplices drilled through the walls of the vault, Reader kept guard. It took them several hours, but eventually they broke through and entered the inner sanctum. They were confronted by rows upon rows of safe deposit boxes. The gang used hydraulic cutting machinery to slice through the steel doors. But not all the boxes could be opened. Many had electronic locks that couldn't be bypassed, so the thieves simply made off with the whole boxes. Their haul would later be valued at tens of millions of pounds. Once they'd filled their wheelbarrows, the gang made their way out of the building using the service lift. At 7:30 a.m., they left the scene and disappeared into the bustling city. For the next week, the gang remained at large. The sheer scale of the heist only became apparent when the rightful owners came to collect their valuables. One woman arrived to find her box completely empty. She'd stored £400,000 worth of diamonds and gold inside, and it was gone. Another man discovered that £200,000 of his life savings had vanished. The robbers had cleaned them out. Word spread around the world, and shocked onlookers dubbed it the 21st century's Great Train Robbery. The police were baffled. How could a gang of pensioners pull off such a daring heist? It seemed like an inside job, but the motive was unclear. Ted, one of the staff members, masterminded the whole thing, or were the thieves simply lucky to have bribed the right person? And who was pulling the strings? The authorities had no idea. But in the weeks following the robbery, clues began to surface. Forensics teams discovered fingerprints and DNA at the scene, but the samples didn't match any known criminals. The breakthrough came when an unsuspecting member of the public spotted a wheelbarrow in a skip. A subsequent search of the area uncovered a white van rented by one of the gang. Inside, officers found power tools, crowbars, and bolt cutters. All of it had been stashed there since the heist. It was a significant find, but the trail went cold once more. Then, a few months later, a woman was cleaning out her father's estate. He'd passed away, but before that, he'd been acting strangely. He'd withdrawn large sums of money from his bank account and even emptied his pension. Concerned that something was wrong, the daughter contacted the authorities and informed them of her suspicions. The man in question was none other than Hugh Error, the inside man. He'd gambled away his life savings, and to cover his losses, he turned to his friends. One of those friends was Brian Reader, the mastermind behind the operation. Together, they recruited 2 more accomplices, William Lincoln and John Collins, and planned the ultimate heist. The men were all in their 70s, and none had any prior criminal records. But under Reader's guidance, they pulled off the biggest cash heist in British history. However, their success was short-lived. With the evidence stacked against them, all 4 men were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit burglary. In February 2016, they appeared at the Old Bailey where they pleaded not guilty. But the prosecution had a strong case. Surveillance cameras had captured images of Brian Reader and Hugh Error outside the building. A witness had seen a white van in the vicinity, and forensics had linked William Lincoln to the scene. As for John Collins, his fingerprints were literally all over the place. He'd accidentally left them on a cigarette packet and a coffee cup at the crime scene. But still, the men tried to fight the charges. Stake claimed the prosecution's case was circumstantial, and there was no direct evidence linking them to the burglary. It didn't work. The jury saw straight through their flimsy denials, and within hours, they reached a guilty verdict. The judge presiding over the case, Mr. Justice Brian Barker, had harsh words for the men. "You are, in my view, all dangerous," he told them. "I have no hesitation in saying this was a thoroughly professional piece of planning and execution." The men were all sentenced to 7 years in prison. Brian Reader, the mastermind, was given an 8-year sentence. He was the oldest of the group, being a full 10 years older than the next oldest, and suffered from numerous health problems. He was already 77 at the time of sentencing and wouldn't make it out alive. Reader was found dead in his cell just 2 months later, having succumbed to cancer. Hugh Error, the inside man, also didn't make it out. Despite being 1 year younger than Reader, he too passed away in custody, his health deteriorating rapidly after his conviction. William Lincoln and John Collins were both released from prison in 2019, having served just over 3 years. But that doesn't mean they walked away empty-handed. The two younger men were ordered to pay back the proceeds of their crime, but neither had any assets to their name. As for the loot itself, almost all of it remains missing. Some of it has turned up, however. In 2017, a pawnbroker in Berkshire called the police after recognizing some of the stolen goods in his shop. A gold bar and 2 diamond rings were returned to their owner. And in 2019, Collins's ex-wife came across £100,000 worth of diamonds hidden in a shoebox. With nowhere else to hide their loot, the remaining gang members must have panicked and buried it somewhere in the countryside. To this day, the police haven't been able to uncover the hiding place. But one thing they are certain about is that the ringleaders enjoyed a brief taste of luxury before they were caught. After the Hatton Garden raid, Brian Reader treated himself to a plush suite at the Landmark Hotel. It cost £600 a night and came with 24-hour room service and a private bathroom stocked with high-end toiletries. Not exactly the getaway of a hardened criminal. But that's not all. Reader's accomplices enjoyed similar luxuries. Hugh Error booked into the 5-star Dorchester Hotel and lavished his granddaughter with designer clothes and perfume. Meanwhile, William Lincoln treated his wife to a pair of £2,000 Jimmy Choo shoes, and John Collins bought a brand new Mercedes. For a while, they lived lives of luxury, safe in the knowledge that they had successfully pulled off the biggest cash heist in British history. But it all came crashing down when the inevitable knock on the door came. They were arrested and sent to prison, where Collins complained about his aching feet. "I can't get used to these bloody shoes," he told a fellow inmate. "They're giving me jip." So what really happened to the Hatton Garden raiders? Well, 2 of them died in prison, and 2 were released. None of them ever revealed the location of the hidden loot. Maybe it was buried in a secret spot in the English countryside, or perhaps it was split up and hidden in various places. Who knows? What is certain is that the gang squandered much of the money on fast cars, luxury hotels, and designer shoes. If they had invested it wisely, they could have all retired comfortably. But they chose greed over security and ended up spending their final years behind bars. That's all for this episode. Thanks for watching.